I'm very glad that all of you showed up today. We had a really fascinating and unusual collective constellation on the third day of the workshop that we did on symptom constellation and healing voices on May 3rd, 2020. It was the final day of our workshop. And I believe that those who were present found it totally fascinating and very revealing. And frankly, very unusual. There were a lot of things that showed up. What we were trying to do was to constellate the message and the meaning behind COVID-19, which of course showed up so dramatically this year and is affecting all of our lives in the entire world. So we started with the concept of what is the message of this virus? What is the message for all of us, for humankind? And I will let Karl-Heinz take it from there because I think he can explain it better than I can.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Well, I don't want to give the whole course of that collective constellation, but I want to talk about collective constellation, why it makes sense to do them. We did many collective constellations in the past, but this was one of the most interesting ones, I think. And the reason why we started to do collective constellations, and I'm not the only one who did that, of course, worldwide, but was the thought that if we do personal issues with the constellation, family constellation, or symptom constellations, we work on the personal level, which always touches somehow the collective levels, but we concentrate on the personal issue. And then we work with unresolved trauma of the past few decades, often Second World War issues, First World War issues, Vietnam War issues, genocide in the past, and slavery, and this is all long ago. And we work like on the single issues like decades after the trauma happened, and during the present times where we still have the situation that trauma is happening every day on a collective level in many countries. So we have a mixture of old trauma and new trauma, and the idea was if we can switch from the personal level, working just with one person or one family, to a more collective level where we have a collective issue, and the outcome and the healing movements which we can start with that can then touch much more people at the same time. And maybe then we can stop the repeating pattern of trauma right there, and that we would have less present trauma going on after a while. And so this was the start of collective constellation. And then the other thing is it really, and this is still an open question, and we can discuss that today, how many people are touched by a collective constellation? Is it only the group who experiences that? This was like a group of 15 or 20 people in this workshop. Or is it that there are many people touched by it on an energetic level, and then there are collective movements started or supported towards a healing movement? And this is still an open question. And with this constellation, we had basically two major messages showing up, messages of the corona pandemic for humankind. And there were two. One is message to mankind means also a message to everybody, because we are all part of that entity. that we should open your heart area, concentrate on your center, which is the heart area, and become compassionate and be what you are, what is your core. This is the one big message. And the second was resist every form of enslavement. And this was on the 3rd of May this year. And it was before the movement anti-racism started, after what happened in the States. So it was interesting to see, and I said that in that workshop. Now let's see what happens on the collective level in the next few weeks, not knowing how big that movement will become, not only in the United States, also worldwide. And so I wanted to have that meeting, to have a follow-up, so we have like a place where we can talk about it, and see what everybody experienced during that workshop, after that, and also the people who may have just heard about it later on or read my blog about it, and what they experienced. And I have some interesting things to report, because I told some people here in Germany about those messages, and they were astonishingly very touched by that. Astonishingly, make up my English. Right. Well, I was astonished. I was astonished that they were so touched, even after they knew that we had some insights that alien people came to the earth and enslaved the humanity here on earth. This was unbelievable. But these people, they did not care about this. They just said, I feel that there is something true to it, that this is really the center of our humanity, our heart, and that we can go back to that and consider everything what is not heart guided as something foreign. Well, and now I would like to ask you, Amy, how was it for you to be there, and how did it? Did you have some personal effects, and how did you experience the collective movements of the last few weeks in the States?
I would say yes, absolutely. I had quite a reaction to that constellation. I was fascinated as it went on, because we brought in so many things. I think you alluded to them in the blog post, if anyone is interested. We talked about and put into the constellation practically anything that could be related, such as the virus and possible vaccines, connections to governments, connections to evil, enslavement, and so on. And I was wondering, how can all these things be connected? And as it went on, and you mentioned, Karl-Heinz, about the alien influence, I remember thinking, as we went further and further back, I know that a lot of people have done a lot of work on constellating coronavirus in the last 6 months or so. This was the first time that I'd been participating in one where we talked about, where is the origin in humanity of that split where some people oppress other people? Where is the origin of that impulse to enslave people, for instance? And also a very prevalent theme in that, which is pretty amazing when you consider what the themes have been of the protests recently, is the theme both in coronavirus and generally in this constellation of not being able to breathe. The message of not getting enough air. Where does that come from? And as this went on, and I know that you kept getting messages as you were saying, okay, where does this come from? What do we look at? What do we bring in? the message was, as I recall, you kept pointing your hand to the sky and saying, it's somewhere out there, out there. And bringing in the message that this could be from another civilization, a different planet, for instance. Theoretically, that's not so unusual, but in practical terms, that's pretty unusual. I remember thinking, can this really be? You know, is this really possible? And whether or not I take that as a reality, what came through the most strongly for me was that there was some original split where some people and other people, or should I say some beings and other beings, behaved in ways that were oppressive, behaved in ways that were not perceiving others as human, behaved in ways that were, I would go
inhuman.
Inhuman. And I mean that whether or not we're talking about aliens, you know, the sort of thing where how could you behave this way to your fellow beings? Because that's really, when we look at how human history has been, that's pretty much the question, isn't it? Like, how can human beings, or how can anyone behave in ways to people who are like them so inhumanely? And I felt very shaken by that revelation. I also noticed as the constellation went on and all the different characters or representatives who were brought in were reacting to this new organization, there was a sense of peace and a sense of freedom that came in. I felt it. I think other people in the constellation felt it. There was a real release of something energetically that has been held in our consciousness as humanity that I believe we wish to release. And that has really stayed with me. And now that, of course, was at the beginning of May. Just several weeks later, the killing of George Floyd happened. And as everybody here knows, I'm sure, even those of you who are not in the US, it's been pretty much around the world in terms of news, the shocking video of a police officer literally cutting off the breath of a man who was in custody already, and the man saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, which of course echoes so many past killings and so much injustice in our society by police and those in authority toward those who are minority figures. It's so striking when you consider that that came up after the coronavirus. Of course, one of the problems with coronavirus is that it attacks the lungs in a way that people have rarely seen before with illnesses, and people have difficulty breathing. So
I do really remember in the scene in the constellation when I was stepping into the beings on the foreign planet, and there were enslaved beings there, and they had masks, and they couldn't breathe. They couldn't breathe because there was too less oxygen on the whole planet, you know, and the elite left to the earth, and the others were left back to die by not having enough air. And then seeing that in this video, and then plus after that, even before that, seeing all the people wearing masks, on the streets or in the shops here. So it was every time I put the mask on, or I see people with a protective mask, it reminds me, okay, here is this the fractal of that truth of having no air on this foreign planet, and this being the initial trauma. on another planet, which led the elite there to us, and they just kept on, enslaving the others, which they could, and this was basically us, the humankind here on this earth, and to come back to that knowledge that we are different, we are very heartful, earth-connected beings, and that we can go back to that and concentrate on that, and that the aggression and the supremacy, the attitude of supremacy, gone. And we had 2 weeks later, we had a collective constellation with another online workshop organized by Samvedam Randlis in Boston, and we had another collective constellation. And this group there wanted to have a constellation about the white supremacy and what's behind that. And it was basically pretty similar to what we had in this constellation. So there is somehow something, an aggressive entity behind that, also influencing the people who were trying to be supreme above other people, and even killing them, like in genocides, and enslave them. So it was very interesting to see that for me. But Amy, should we open it now for everybody to maybe report and share, and maybe have also questions?
I think that would be wonderful, because I know that some of the audience here are people that were there that day and played a full part in it. And I would love to hear what they have to say and what their memories are and what it has been for them ever since.
Yeah. And I just forgot, if you don't want to talk, or you can also use chat. Everybody can use chat to ask questions, to share something, and all the questions will be somehow, we try to answer it during this meeting, or per email after that. But in this case, if you want to have contact with this issue, you just put your email address there if you want, or write to us later on. But please use chat if you want to do that. And now I will, since everybody is listening now, I will demute everybody, and then please everybody mute again, and then the one who wants to talk demutes him or herself. So now everybody is demuted, and now please now mute again, and the one who talks can just demute and talk, please. Is it possible that you talk and demute? Can you try? Can somebody try? Susan, you can.
Yes.
Ah, wonderful.
Yes.
So everybody can. And who is not muted now, please mute yourself if you don't want to talk. Oh, please, Susan, go ahead.
Okay. So I was present at that constellation and found it fascinating. It sort of brought together for me a lot of victim and perpetrator issues that I've been aware of in our country for a long time. And for me personally, I've always felt like a victim. And when we did this constellation, I remember telling you that I moved from victim to victim to victim, going back in time, and then ended up as one of the victims in the original enslavement. And I can tell you that I left the practice of dental hygiene because I said I was working my way out of slavery in this lifetime. So for me, it was very, very personal. My family history that I learned later in life was I have slaveholders on my mother's side of the family. And yet, every time I look into it, I'm identified with the slaves. So for me, this was a very enlightening constellation. It helped me understand why that the issue of enslavement and victimization was so ingrained in me personally. And I've had a fascination with the extraterrestrials for a long time. I have a very large library and have, so for me, this was a coming together of several of my fascinations, not only with constellations, not only with extraterrestrials but also with viruses. I have a very large collection of killer germs and so for me, this sort of brought everything together.
Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever wants to talk, sharing questions or reports, even if you were not part of that group, if you just heard about it later, and if you want to share what it did to you, just to knowing what happened, then please, you are invited to talk and share.
I'll share. I'm Rana, and I was in the Constellation on May 3rd, and that whole series of 3 days, which was very transformative for me because I got the privilege of having a health issue constellated first, and that's been just very life-changing for me because we kind of, when you first stepped into it, Karl-Heinz represented what that issue meant. It was like that thing still has you by the hair, and I felt it, and I've really felt a sense of peace that's come into my whole family system, and I'm able to now move away from where I was taking care of my daughter's health, and a big movement in my own life. I'm moving into a new home next Monday, so it was being able to see the root that I was aware of the root cause of that, and then work with those healing voices was transformative. And the gift of constellation for me in general, and for my clients, and then I got several of them here on the phone because I said you got to watch this. Is really that seeing the unseen, and that's what constellation has brought to me, and including the excluded, whatever form they're in. And I think in that constellation, one of the biggest revelations for me is when you were standing in the position of evil personified, or the devil, and you just lean in against the wall going, hey, I don't even have to do anything anymore. They're all doing it to themselves, and how the pattern continues until we bring in the unhealed, victim perpetrator dance, that we learned through constellation training. We're in a locked step dance until we look at our own roles on both sides of the equation. And that big issue we constellated is something, the whatever you could call the Anunnaki invasion, I've been aware of since 2002, and wasn't really able to see the bigger picture, but it was finally made clear. And since then I've continued to work with my group, and going back to the origin of this. It's told in mythology and story in the spiritual communities, and I think it finally feels like it shifted enough so that it could impact the collective, and we can all look at our ability to breathe and speak our truth or not be muzzled. And that's just I'm seeing a tremendous amount of freedom for people who have the courage to go into the depth, and like one of our powerhouse women that was there, and stand in the position of that foreign being, and said, we didn't understand that these were sentient feeling life forms. And that to my experience at the end, that reorganization, where all the beings that were there were able to understand that we really are, you know, a collective consciousness, and that sense of peace that came about at the end. So it's pretty phenomenal. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wasn't present there, and I'm wondering, for those of us who weren't there, if you could explain the references to the reorganization in this constellation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay, for that question. It was more than a reorganization. What really did the job was healing voices in my understanding, and healing voices is a shamanic energetic healing method which developed itself in my work in the last 20 years. And I started like 5 or 6 years ago to also integrate it, not only on a very personal level where you just lay there and on a massage bed and get these energies, but that I also integrated it into the systemic constellation work. And what it does, those energies, well, you can imagine those healing energies being present invisibly in the air, and like in a special Wi-Fi field. Now, the informations which we work and which we get access to in a normal constellation are also, we talk about an informational field or knowing field. This is also like a special Wi-Fi field, but this is different. Those healing energies are there, and it's a different field. It's a different energy field. It's not informational, it's healing, really healing, pure healing energy. And those energies, I invite them to work in those situations where in the constellation there is no further move towards a healing, and unresolved trauma is present, often with victim and perpetrator fields. And what they do is they push the negative energy, whatever that is, back, and they bring the souls of those people who experienced the trauma and were still energetically frozen in that trauma, which is then unresolved trauma, of course, bring those souls out of that frozen state, so that those souls can go on and go the path they have to go after the body died. And this can be obviously done after decades and also hundreds of years, because time plays no role in this unresolved trauma issues. And healing voices do that. And they did it in this constellation on a collective level too. And they did it on collective constellations in the past too. And so I would not be able to, how I could do that to heal souls of beings in a foreign planet, which might not, who died maybe, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years ago, or with ancestors of the African people who were enslaved. And I do that in my normal daily constellation work. I work with healing voices there on the personal level, but it's also collective, because the souls of the ancestors are healed. And here, the reconstructive thing was not really reorganizational thing, was really done by these healing energies. So that's what I can say to that.
Can you just, thank you. Can you tell us what it looked like in the constellation?
What the constellation looked like? There were like more than 50 positions there, and it was done in a big big place here in Germany. I was alone there because it was online workshop, and I had like papers like this on the floor with the names of the positions there, and there were really more than 50. And I was doing the representative work, plus the participants of the workshop were invited to stand in some of these positions in their room over there. Just stand up and step next to their chair or the back of their chair, and just define that there would be in this position or in that. And of course, the participants did that. So and we heard what their input was, and it was my input also when I was stepping from one position to the other one. So, and then during Healing Voices, I was just a medium going through that constellation and touching all those beings and souls as a medium, and this is through gestures. So I lend my body them for gestures for a few minutes, and I lend them my voice, because it goes through sounds, and sometimes there are words or even sentences out of ancient languages which we don't understand on the brain level, but we do understand it on the heart level. And when these healing voices work with negative energy, they get really loud and aggressive, and then they soothe down, and then later on they even sing like a song or touch invisibly the souls of the living and the dead in the constellation, which is, you can see it happening in the constellation. Even there's only a paper there, but it's working, and it's at the same time it was felt by everybody who was participating online, and this was Germany, United States, and other states, and it could be very worldwide. And this is the most interesting thing, I think, that we can do this work online now, all with participants and people all around the world, which is really supporting the collective idea of this work.
So, if I could share.
Hi, Gary.
Hello, how are you?
Sure.
If I could share just briefly my own experience. So, I did join the event earlier. I was there for the second day, but not the third day. And the third day is kind of the inspiration for this event. But let me just share briefly my own perspective. So during that constellation we were having, or that discussion, my focus was crystallized around my own personal trauma and family trauma, and in particular about the enslavement. I have a great grandfather who was born an enslaved person. This is mid-1860s, and then escaped by fear of a lynching to Oklahoma, where most of my family comes from. On the other side of the family, my African rooted family were brought to Oklahoma as slaves of Indians. So there was a kind of a concentration of both the enslaved and the slaveholders in that generation of the family, which eventually evolved, and I was born in Oklahoma and grew up there. So the reason why I think this discussion is important to me is because of the very acute feelings of trauma I've been feeling in this particular period. Obviously, that some are influenced by political events or other things taking place with George Floyd, etc. The lack of ability to breathe. Breathing is a lifelong challenge for me. And so what this is helping me to do is to understand that this feeling of mine is not coincidental, that it is if you will, a reawakening, a rehearkening of those earlier ancestral events, which I will just mention briefly, seemed to heighten a couple of weeks ago when there was all of this national influence over Tulsa, where I grew up, and the ascendancy of white supremacy in Tulsa in the community that I grew up in. So it all kind of hit a peak at that moment. So I just shared that story.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And you know, the corona pandemic hit the peak for many people and on many levels. And if we talk here about our issue, to be compassionate to the other one, the other human being, and then if you're compassionate, you cannot enslave them. And so enslavement and supremacy over others, and power over others, is really was the biggest input of that collective constellation. And it's not only in the United States. I mean, I tell you here about even in Germany. Well, even in Germany, we learned that there is a sort of enslavement going on here too in the butcher industry here, where they have to to cut the meat. They had still have workers from Romania, and they were treating them like slaves. They had almost no money, and they had to work like 12 or 16 hours. Even they forced them to work, even if they said they were sick. And now they all got coronavirus because they were their immune system was so weak, to be so stressed, so forced, so bad food. They had to sleep in one room with 8 others, just for a few hours, wake up and go on and again. So right now, it's going on right now. So our society here in Germany is now aware of that there is some enslavement going on in our communities here. And then I just read in a German newspaper that the Sioux people in the States, that they make controls on their street to make sure that nobody comes in to the reservation and brings in the coronavirus. So, and they even stop the white people and say, "Stop here! You have to go back. You don't have any reason to go there. So if you don't, you have to turn around." So they are waking up and say, "Well, we are taking care of us and of our people." So, this input is now worldwide in so many countries, even in India. But this was before the workers had left the big cities, going home to their villages and so on. So it's really a big issue for that. And the second thing is, just I wanted to put that into the discussion here, is that we saw in this constellation that there was a strong connection between mankind and the Earth, planet Earth and Mother Earth. And so I understood that we are really people of the Earth, being connected to our center as the heart. And this is opened up some really nice, interesting feelings in me. And Amy, you said, you finally have hope for humankind after that experience. Well, thank you, Gary, for that input.
Oh, I'm unmuted. I guess I should talk. I didn't even know I was unmuted. I was at the the Constellation in early May. And as we're speaking now, I'm even having more aha moments. And I've had some really unique perspectives since that Constellation. And I came to Carl with an incident that I had where I had a constellation on me, where I was a police officer years ago. And when I was arresting someone, it turned around where I became the victim, and I was attacked. And it just occurred to me that when I was attacked, I couldn't breathe at the time. But fast forward to the George Floyd incident, it really gave me a unique perspective. For one, the incident happened in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I was really able to see myself as a police officer on how I thought I was, helping the community and doing good, which I was in many ways, but it also brought the realization that that I was a perpetrator, that I had power over people. And I'm able to look at all this that is going on, particularly in the community in the Twin Cities, and really take a step backwards and observe it without having any type of visceral reaction, because I'm starting to understand this victim-perpetrator on a much deeper level. So I feel lucky in many ways to have that perspective as being a police officer, where many people don't understand what it's like being in that type of work. So I got disoriented many times as I watched as things started to unfold in the Twin Cities, because I could see many different things on so many different levels and so many different sides, that it was really disorienting for me for a while. And it took about a week before I could probably get my grounding more and to really understand what the emotions and thoughts were going through my head. So it's really broadened my perspective since this constellation in early May.
Thank you, Mary. The big question for me is whether the impact of those collective constellations. Is there an impact on society, even to people who are not experiencing that right then? Is there, out of this, the healing movements of healing voices in the constellation, is there a shift in the whole collective energy field? And are those collective movements which happen then, days or weeks later, is it connected? Are we really doing healing work in this big, huge collective scenes. Are we doing that? If so, it would be, of course, wonderful to then proceed with that work and do that more often with more and more people and see what happens then, and make a documentation about it and learn what that how powerful collective constellations connected with healing voices energies, shamanic healing voices energies, how powerful are they? Or is it only for those people who experience that there? It's an open question. Of course, we could say, well, we see it, there was something going on, but we don't know how it was without this constellation. And I don't say, well, we did it, but I think that what we experienced there, that we were already part of a bigger picture. And it was there were things going on already, and we might have give a certain input which turned the page maybe, and we will learn about that in the future. And I think we have to learn that, because if we would have that tool, and the shamanic people and indigenous peoples, they have the rituals for that also. So there are many people on this earth who might be able to work to that aim of ending collective trauma on a big scale. And this is, one of the reasons I wanted to have to start a conversation about it, that we can all together learn more about it.
I'd like to add something. I was there also, and I have two pieces to add, and one was an aha for today. But I'm in a program on collective trauma, and some of my colleagues are here today. And what we keep discovering as we go back, that the basic collective trauma was separation. And this constellation helped to see where that came from. That it didn't come from the earth, from us here, but came here. And that was so helpful, because we had been, we could go back and back, but we couldn't get to the source of it. But the other piece that just got illuminated for me, that's just interesting, and I'm going to put some pieces together that may belong or maybe not, but the workshop was generated by Amy, who's in Washington, D.C., where I am and where some of the other people too. And Washington, D.C. is in many ways a colony. And we just had yesterday on the House floor a vote for statehood. But we are in many ways victims, white and black and brown, whoever lives here. And to see what Trump did when he went across Lafayette Park and stood in front of that church and hold his Bible, and then having our mayor come out and as an act paint, designating that area as Black Lives Matter Plaza and writing, Black Lives Matter on the ground. To me, we're a city where there's a real sense of slavery. The reason why we're not a state is really because we have so many Black people, Democrats, but that's really the reason why our country has not given us that opportunity. And so particularly for, and Gary can speak to this much more than me, but it's almost like a double enslavement, living in, being of color, living in DC. But even those like me who are white, there's a level of enslavement. But there was something so beautiful about what our mayor did. And it was kind of a stand like, I'm not going to be enslaved. And for me, it felt like she spoke for all of us. It kind of lifted us out of that place. And then there's been a lot of media coverage about the special situation we're in, because in the United States, there's been a sense, we're a free country and we're all equal. And here's another example that we're not. So I think there may be something connected with that too.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Well, I think this is a great message. Don't accept any form of enslavement. If everybody has that and takes that, that means, of course, that you don't accept being part of a system who does enslave other people. And, of course, also not accept being enslaved yourself, both ways. So it touches really a lot of basically everybody. Back to the question: what kind of food are you buying, or what kind of clothes are you buying? And now in Germany, what kind of meat do you buy to support somebody who is an slaveholder, really, and making a lot of money out of the misery of so many people?
If I could add something to that, and I agree, I think that was a very important and symbolic thing for the District of Columbia to be doing. I would also say that I find it fascinating that since this collective constellation, which of course was only the beginning of May, the terrible events of George Floyd's death and what happened afterward really did seem to be a sea change in the consciousness of a lot of, I'm going to say, white Americans. You know, there have been many people who are involved in anti-racist works and a lot of collective consciousness among certain groups of people about that. But astonishingly, after that event, perhaps because it was so brutal and so shocking and it was so visual, people saw that video and were disgusted, shocked, outraged. And I believe in a way, many people in America who were able to kind of rationalize the position of what it's like to be Black in our society, what it's like to be a person of color in our society, started to see things a little bit differently. You have books about consciousness about race all of a sudden on the bestseller list. You have people starting conversations about that. Hold on a sec, I might have some interference and sound in the background. But I find it fascinating that all those things arose together. There are people now who will say, wow, I read the book White Fragility just now, and I've really been changed by it. I start to see things differently. And it's just amazing to me how those things seem, they seem connected, and that everything at least is riding along on this wave of perhaps a little bit of the veil has been lifted, and people are able to start seeing things that they weren't seeing before.
That's one important thing, I think, what coronavirus did to all of us, that we see things which we didn't see before. They were there all the time, but we didn't see it. And there's still so many things we don't see. And now we're talking about the people of African descent being enslaved and still suffering also from the family entanglements that they have. But there are others too. I mean, the indigenous peoples there. I think we could, if we all see that, you know, we white people, we could stand up for everybody. These are all our people. We are all our people. So make no difference between this and this enslaved human being. If somebody is enslaved, we should stand up and free them. And of course, not accept any enslavement of ourselves, which of course there is a possibility that we might, and this is really something. So seeing what is there, seeing that, and the pandemic does open our eyes, and the constellations we can do open our eyes even more, because we can see into the unconscious things. And I'm glad that we have that tool, and we should think about maybe doing more of that work together, and doing more of this workshops, and maybe come together also later on in a few weeks or months, whenever we can organize it, to just go on with this work, because we might all need we might need more eye openness. If you see it, you cannot pretend not seeing it anymore, and that makes a big difference.
I would like to share one more thing in response to your earlier comments, is that I mentioned this to Amy when I first came into the workshop, but I'm a documentary filmmaker. And I would like to, I know there's a way that we can film and do this experiment, because the medium of film is still very powerful. And I think, just throw it out to people in this group, that I've been looking to do the next documentary film where we can do a group constellation, and then we can show the impact it has on the environs. And in my first film, we had indigenous elders from around the world, like the Lakota Sioux, and some of these connections I have. And I found out in subsequent work since the group constellation, I was working with one of my clients, that in the United States of America, the native indigenous people here were not considered human beings under the law. The black people were considered 3/4 human beings, but the natives were considered the same as animals. And so we were doing a constellation around the tribal areas where her family farm was, inspired by that. But I know we can make a documentary film and use that very powerful medium when we can start traveling again and filming. And that's been one of the things I've been exploring, is how do we do that? And I'm willing to be in communication, a conversation around that, because I really believe there's a way we can show that, to answer that question, are we having an impact? So I'll just throw that out there.
Well, thank you, Ronna. This is great. I mean, I write for films, and I have this perspective also, and it would be good to have people together to do a documentary about a future collective constellation, and have, of course, first the interviews to see the preparation, and then have the constellation, have the reactions, and then follow up for a few weeks what's going on the collective level, and then do a film documentary about it. I think this would be great. It would be great, and we could even see then all the words and the sentences which were spoken in the constellation, which have so many meanings on different levels, and also record healing voices in a constellation, which will be pretty powerful. So even people after that could be part of that experience. And well, wonderful. Thank you for that, Ronna. Wonderful idea.
May I just chime in here and say, we've already had one question about, was this particular constellation recorded? And I wanted to explain to everyone that we did not record the workshop simply because most of the workshop was about individual constellations. And so in order to keep everyone's privacy and make sure that everyone feels respected, we did not do that. But I agree with Karl-Heinz that in the future, especially if we get together to constellate something that is on a global level and people's personal information is not exposed, that would be a wonderful thing. And Rhonda, thank you so much for the offer. I would love to figure out how we can do this and how we can include more people.
Yes, Amy, thank you. When we met Amy, remember this was in Virginia Beach. Was this 2016 or 17?
2017.
17. I was invited to give a speech, a keynote speech about collective healing, and I did. And this speech, I was. It's published. Not on video, it's published in a written form on my homepage. You can read it. And what my vision was then, and it still is, that we need collective healing rituals on, like it looks like future music, or it sounded like future music in 2017. It's not so future music right now after what we are going through right now. But my vision was that we need big, huge collective rituals on the big squares of our cities. Everybody should be invited, and there are some things which should be there in those rituals, so we can get healing out of that, and we could even include healing voices now after all those experiences, and show a documentary film like this, or yeah. So this is pretty amazing. Now having rituals on the big square, meaning online, this is the biggest square we can have. Now, with a webinar of like 20,000 people. So I never thought that this would be possible and imaginable so soon.
So one of the things that we're discovering is that, like the old Chinese saying, this crisis is not only danger, but opportunity. And it is giving us the opportunity to go in so many more directions. I would also like to point something out, which is that during most of the workshop, when we did do the individual constellations, we had several people that had, and I'm not going to speak of what that is personally for them, and they can if they wish. I was very struck with the fact that several people afterwards told me that they had rapid and seemingly permanent, at least as far as you can tell after a few weeks, relief in physical symptoms. And that was very striking to me. When the individual constellations were done, not all of them, but some of them had collective elements in them, just as you mentioned earlier, Karl-Heinz. So my feeling is that the more work we do on all levels, inevitably we will run into layers and layers of the collective, and perhaps how Constellations got started was doing the work on an individual level, and is now, as also in the work of Thomas Hübl, it's getting broadened to the collective layers of trauma and the collective layers of man's inhumanity to man and so on. So I'm so impressed. One of the reasons I'm so impressed by the individual constellations and the quick resolutions is seeing how quickly this can happen, and seeing how quickly real change can come about on a physical level. And I'm very curious to see, like, if more and more people are involved in doing the collective constellations, how many more people can that touch, and how many more layers of collective unconscious can be moved through this?
Yes, for sure. Amy, if you do collective healing, it's healing also on the personal level of so many persons, so many people. And I saw that too, that people were reporting improvement of physical symptoms just by being there and experiencing that. I just put the link to my keynote speech in Virginia Beach in the chat. So if you want to copy that, you can read it later. And maybe we have one more possibility to hear one more of all of you. And then I would like to introduce Healing Voices a little bit more. And so we can together have a collective healing experience today. And I will just do a Healing Voices input for opening the heart later on. But I will say a little bit more later on. But we have maybe Amy, little bit time for one more. And if you didn't have the opportunity to speak up today, you can write to us, and we will reconnect to you. And if you want to be informed, please write to Amy, or you can also subscribe to my English newsletter on my homepage, and then you will get all the news about further on workshops and webinars automatically. But somebody wants to talk now and take the opportunity to share something. We have still a few minutes.
Hello, hi, Karl-Heinz. My name is Susan.
Hello, Susan.
Hi, and I have a question. It's been wonderful to be part of this conversation. It's been almost 2 months since the May constellation, and I'm wondering how your understanding of resist every form of enslavement has developed since the constellation on May 3rd, and what that looks like, how that, your sense of that for us now.
I think it's still the same. I mean, we could do a new constellation about it, and it might be slightly different, or maybe additional messages which might open our eyes to other areas of our society and our life. But these two messages, concentrate to the center of your being, your heart and compassion, plus resist any form of enslavement, is this will be true for a long time. So I don't expect that to change, but I always learn from a constellation. So if we would do a new one, and I think we will do in the future several of them, of course. So we will include that and see and learn from there. Yeah, that's what I can say, Susan.
Maybe I didn't express this well, and I'll be quick here. I want to know how in my life, what this would look like. I can attend a march, I can attend a protest, I sign online, I'm online all the time, I read books, all of that. I'm wondering if you could say something to what that is, resist every form of enslavement. What that is as an action.
Yeah, you could. These are, you can find that out yourself. You just open up for this sentence and see, are you a part of a system which enslaves other people, and is somebody enslaving you in a sort of? You can find that this cannot be explained to everybody, or should not be explained to everybody. You can have examples, of course, but what it really means to you, that's, that you find that out yourself. I just mentioned, don't buy clothes if you know that the people were enslaved, producing it, or being mistreated, or not respected. Or it's not only clothes, it's maybe also technology. You can also be unconsciously enslaved, like dominated from a system, and the system tries to control your thoughts. Like now, everybody should be in fear, but I say no. Don't be in fear. Fear is not helpful. Fear is depressing your immune system. Fear is making you sick. So what you do is looking at the virus as a friend, as somebody who brings you something very important on the personal level. Everybody can see that. You can do constellations about it. And I do online constellations with many people all around the world to find out what is that for myself, for this person, or collectively. So it's an open field. It's an open field, and we learn with time.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Okay, Amy, should we switch? Now we have 10 minutes. We can go to the Healing Voices input today.
That would be wonderful. And I'm going to ask you a favor, because I see that you put the information about the keynote speech, but I believe it went to everyone in the waiting room. So
oh my God.
I'm trying to not be successful. Because
okay, thank you for that.
That would be wonderful. And I would also like to say, because as we end up after the Healing Voices, we may be all in a state where we're not quite able to, where we want to stay in a while. So I would like to say, if everybody, some of you have put your emails in the chat, if you want to, there's someone in the waiting room. I'll admit them for the Healing Voices, okay?
Yeah.
If you would like to be on the mailing list for future events, specifically related to this, please do send an email to me if you got the announcement through my email, or to Karl-Heinz, or found out about it on Facebook. Just send me a direct message there. I'd love to compile a complete list of who is here to keep you all informed.
Somebody's not muted. Can you check? Somebody check. Well, for now I will, because we want to stop it in 10 minutes. I will just, Amy, mute everybody, and then I go ahead with Healing Voices.
Yes, there are people on their phones who need to mute as well. I'm not sure if you can do that personally, Karl-Heinz.
I don't know.
If Good Luck Charm and Vicky can mute their phones, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, so I don't have to do that. Yeah. Okay, now. Well, now there's only a short introduction to this. I will be a medium for Healing Voices in the next few minutes for you, and I will invite the healing energies of Healing Voices to open up everybody's heart area. And if you want to open up for that, you could have some healing movements, or maybe feelings wanting to flow, and this is good. You can just allow that, or if you say, well, I would just want to hear it, but I don't want to be touched by it, you just decide that you block yourself from that, and it will not. This will be respected by that. But if you open up, and I recommend, of course, that you open up and welcome whatever there for you, then you, then you follow whatever comes, whatever develops in you. now. And well, I say this should be like opening your heart area, but healing voices, those healing energies, they don't stop on this level. So you might even have some symptoms coming or going, or even on the physical level. So whatever there is, it might be touched by that, what's coming now. And after that, we will not talk a lot. We will just be there for a silent minute and then just say goodbye, because there's not, we will see that, not much to be talked about later on. And you can just be in the state in which you get now after we close the meeting, and just sit for a while and let whatever, have some time with that. Okay, so I will there's thunder outside here. So I will put my picture away. So you will only hear me. And we start from here. And you can just close your eyes if you want, and just listen and concentrate on what's going on within you. And don't be amazed, because everything can happen now in the positive way, and you are in a safe place. I'm standing for that. No, nothing will harm you now. Let's start. Hayatowa Hayataya Ho. Hayatoya Wayataya Ho. Hayatoya Wayataya Ho. Hayatoya Wayataya Ho. Hayatoya Wayataya Ho. Hayavoya Kyawasaya Hayawata Yizayu. Wayataya Ha. Yesamoyi Hesava Yesamoteya. Oh, yes, I'm yes, yes, I'm yes, tell you what, yes, I'm tell you what, yes, I'm yes, some yes, yes, I'm yes, what, yeah, was yes, oh, yes, okay. Oh, okay, so much, yes, 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 tell me some more, yes, oh, what's that? Emote, samote, avo, ese mote, samote, semote, semoye, semote, savo, semote, semote, Esaoteya Samo Evo Sevote Safke Sema Oye Samofte Samota O Samoye Heseme Samaye Sayosa Esemofte Sayoye Tazamaye, Ezemoftaye, Zemeftahaye, Ezefye Hausa Kyosa Bete Yesa Yo. Samoho, Samoho, Zeye, Zemaha, Samaha, Samato, Yesavo. Teya so yesavo, teya vo so. Teya savo, tesemov teya so. Teya savo, teya. Yesamo tese hi savo to. Yesemov teya savo te. Yesemo Teye samoho, tese moyete samet. Oye sabo se fi safke, se vite fiamo teo. Yese mate yese vo, yese mafte yese vo, yese mafte yese fke sabo to fiesa. Yes, I'm on. Ezem of te yezavo. Te yezef kiro saye. Te yezef yezef yosef tezef. Eyazo. Yezef yezavo. Emem. Te yezef yezavo. Emem. Te yezef kyozamo. Te yezef yezamo. Ezem of tezef kezamo, te yezaf kezaf te yamim, te yevjev tozemo, te yezef kezavo. Ezem ahayev tezama, ezem ahayev teman, ezem ahayev tezayezef kezaf yozamo. Ezaf kezaf kezama, ezaf kezaf kezama, ezaf kezevo te yizaf yom to ye. Yezef, Yezef, Kezama, Yezef, Kezaf, Kezamo, Yezef, Kezeve, To Yezef, Yo, Sam Ezeme, Yezef, Yevzazov, Kezeme, Zemazef, Kezef, Kezamo, Yeftezaf, Yezavo, Yezef, Kezavo. Okay, Amy. Did you hear all of that? I wasn't sure whether it stopped the meeting because we were a little over time. Did you hear all of that?
We heard all of that. Thank you. That was wonderful. And yes, very heart opening. Yeah. I'd like to just take a moment to thank and acknowledge everyone who showed up here today. It was such a privilege to share this healing space with all of you. And Karl-Heinz, I would like to thank you for facilitating the original constellation, for following up, for including all of us in this space and being willing to see what happens next.
Yes, and thank you. You're welcome. Everybody's welcome. It's also a present for myself that I can do this work. Maybe we just have a little group feeling. You can go on gallery view, everybody, and just you can demute yourself and just say goodbye, and then have your time then when we stop it. Stop the meeting to feel more. But bye-bye. See you maybe soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.